So since this week we are reading about the mitzvah of love your fellow like yourself, and this is something that Baal Shem Tov taught us and explained as at the foundation of Chassidus. So it's appropriate to focus on this week, especially also this week we're also reading Pirkei Avos, and one of the reasons we read Pirkei Avos this time of year is because it says in Derech Eretz Kadmon LaTorah, you have to be able to be a mensch before you begin getting the Torah, before you begin to perform Torah. So on Shavuos we get the Torah. So because Derech Eretz Kadmon LaTorah, because you have to learn how to be a mensch first before you absorb Torah, therefore we learn the Masechet Avos, this tractate, now in this season before Shavuos, to get in touch with what Torah is about. So there are two very famous statements about Avos Yisrael, and today we're going to try to dissect them and see what each of these statements is contributing. The first statement is from the Gemara Masechta Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph and Beis. It's a famous story we know about this non-Jew who wanted to convert to Judaism, and he came to Shammai, and he told Shammai, I want to convert to Judaism on condition that you teach him the whole Torah while I stand on one foot. So Shammai pushed him away, the Gemara says. So he goes to Hillel. And Hillel says, what's hateful unto you, don't do it to anybody else. So he says, that's the whole Torah. And Hillel says, the rest, go and learn. That's what Hillel said. So that's one statement, which seems to indicate that the entire Torah is Avos Yisrael. That's what Hillel said. Zeh kol Torah kul. This is the whole Torah. Then there's another teaching from the Teres Kainim, which Rashi quotes this week from Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says, on the verse, you should love your fellow like yourself. Rabbi Kiva says, this is a major principle in Torah. So it sounds like Rabbi Kiva and Hillel are both trying to say the same thing, and yet they use different words. Look carefully, not only they're not saying the same thing, but there's actually a contradiction between what they're saying. Hillel says this is the entire Torah. That's all. This is the entirety of Torah. That's all Torah is. Versus Rabbi Akiva, who says this is just a major principle in Torah, not the whole Torah. So Rabbi Akiva lived many generations after Hillel. So what is he coming to add to Hillel or subtract from Hillel? Hillel already said this the whole Torah. I think it's a major principle in Torah. You're saying less, not more. And Hillel already said it's the whole Torah. So what is he contributing? There's not such a question according to Nigla, according to looking at Torah from the exoteric perspective, just the simple meaning of the Torah. It's not a question. As Rashi says, Rashi gives two explanations to Hillel's statement. First statement, explanation Rashi gives is, how is it obviously show the whole Torah? Rashi explains when it says in the Torah, love your fellow like yourself, the Rashi explains the word fellow refers to Hashem. As it says in the Pasuk, Re'acha, Ve're'a avicha, al tazik. Your friend, the friend of your father, don't leave him. So since God is called our friend, so when it says in the Torah, love your fellow like yourself, it means love God. Love Hashem like you love yourself. So if you're meant to love Hashem like you love yourself, so obviously that's all-inclusive of the entire Torah, because Hashem gives us all the mitzvahs. So it makes sense how Hillel said this is the entire Torah. That's one explanation Rashi gives. Rashi gives a second explanation. Rashi says that doesn't literally mean all the mitzvahs. It means most of the mitzvahs. Rubika kule, most is considered like all. The majority of mitzvahs are connected to things between man and man, and therefore it is called the whole Torah, although it's only the majority of Torah. That's what Rashi says. But Rabbi Akiva is clearly saying more than that. Rabbi Akiva says this is a major principle in Torah. Not just majority, it's a major principle in the entire Torah. So it sounds a little more than the way Rashi qualifies Hillel's statement. So you have to figure that out. So the truth is that the Ramban, Nachmanides, he doesn't want to explain that this mitzvah means in a simple sense to love your fellow like yourself. He doesn't want to say that because he says it defies reality. How is it possible that the Torah is commanding us to have such strong feelings for each other? Instead, the Ramban quotes the Haftarah that we read yesterday to explain what the Torah means. Yesterday we learned in the Haftarah that Shaul had this custom that everyone will come to eat bread with him on Rosh Chodesh, and I think they were told various people to do the same thing. Their family make a big Rosh Chodesh event. Either way, David does not show up, and he doesn't show up because he feels that Shaul is out to get him. And Yonasan is at this meal, and Shaul asks Yonasan, "Where's David?" And Yonasan gives an excuse where David is, and Shaul is very upset, and he tells his son, he throws a spear at his son, he tells his son that you're foolish. You're a foolish person. Why are you foolish? I know you love David, but you love David to a point that's foolish. Why is it foolish? Because you and David are vying for the same position. Both of you want to be king. You can't both be king at the same time. So it's not like you love someone and you care about them. Your human being only has enough love to love another person, but still keeping themselves above them. That's what Shaul was saying. What Shaul was saying was logical. You loving another person more than yourself or as much as yourself doesn't make sense. So therefore, the Ramban says, when the Torah says love your fellow like yourself, it means act like a mensch. Doesn't mean that you have to actually have a greater feeling for the other person than yourself. That's not possible. What it means is act like a mensch. Put other person's needs before yourself, before your own. But it cannot mean, as it is in a simple sense, to love another person like yourself. It's not possible. The Torah will command us to do something which is against our natural instinct. What the Ramban said is in sync with Chassidic's, the Chassidic term klippas nega. Klippas nega means, klippa means a concealment of godliness, and noiga means that there's a concealment, but there's still some light there. So Chassidus says that our natural sense of self is klippas nega. Our natural humanness, natural I, is klippas nega. That's something that tells me, okay, I want to help you. You don't have a car, so I'm going to help you get a Chevy. But if I'm driving a Toyota, I'm not going to help you buy a Lexus. I'm not. My Avos is not going to put you above me. My Avos is going to help you to get somewhere beneath me. Not to give you more than I have. That's klippas nega. But the Alter explains in Tanya that the mitzvah of loving your fellow like yourself actually means, in a simple sense, and actually means something we could achieve. And he explains why. And he also explains why it's called the whole Torah. The Alter says that the distinction between one person and another is only external. It's only because of the body. Looking at things from the perspective of the body, you are you and I am I, and we're separate from each other. However, if I look at things from the perspective of my neshama, so we're all brothers. We have one Father in heaven. I think differently than you. I feel differently than you. I am someone different than you. That's all external. But looking at it from a perspective of my neshama, you and I are both brothers. We come from the same Father. So it's logical to love your fellow like yourself, because as Alter says, that all Jewish people are achim mamish, literally brothers. Since we're literally brothers, therefore also is possible to achieve. In a way, this is more than what the Vision said, Rabbi. I think it was Vision Rabbi who said that a non-perfect tzaddik is able to love a non-complete Russian, and a perfect tzaddik is able to love a complete Russian. That's a Vision Rabbi said. But Alter says something far more. You're not looking at the distinction between one person and another. You're brothers. Your brothers doesn't matter. Your brother did a crime. Okay, but he's still your brother. So the Alter Rebbe says, this is why Avos Yisrael is, as Hillel says, Kol HaTorah Kula, the entire Torah. Why is it the entire Torah? Because the whole entire Torah is meant to reveal the soul. When the soul is revealed, so then I experience this love for you like myself, because I realize that we're brothers. That's when I'm living on a soul level. When the Neshama is revealed. When Neshama is revealed, so then I look at you and myself as brothers. However, if my Neshama is not revealed, and all I feel is my body, or I feel my body more than my soul, so then there's a distinction between you and I. Then we're separate from each other. The most like I love you is according to how much I appreciate your values, your characteristics, your goodness. My love will be as deep and as long as I appreciate and how deeply as I appreciate the goodness that you have. If I'm attracted to your character, we get along. That's as long as you have those character traits, I love you. You lose those character traits, I'll stop. And I love you as deeply as I appreciate those character traits. But eventually, there's a point where the love isn't there. It only goes as deep as my appreciation. However, if my neshama is revealed, then I'm loving you not because of my mind, not because of my heart, loving you because of my soul. So the love is infinitely deep, and the love is never, nothing can stop it. It's a love of brothers. It's a love that's deeper than rationale. So the Alter Rebbe says that's why the whole Torah is called explanation of Avos Yisrael, because how do you get to Avos Yisrael? How are you able to love your fellow like yourself? By performing all of Torah. All of Torah is meant to underscore the primacy of the soul over the body and to reveal the soul. So I'm doing all these mitzvahs and I'm learning all this Torah, hoping to reveal my neshama, be more in touch with my soul. And then when I am more in touch with my soul, a litmus test that I have gotten in touch with my soul is I have Avos Yisrael. So derech yeshar v'kala, the straight and easy way to fulfill the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is to make my soul more important than my body. And the way to achieve that is through the performance of Torah. That's why it's the whole Torah. Okay, that's what the author says in time. Actually, Tzemach Tzedek explains that based on Gemara Yerushalmi says that just like if one of your hands does something wrong, you hurt your hand. You don't punish the hand that you got that got hurt by cutting it. It's two hands of the same body. So too, it says in Gemara Yerushalmi, we're all one body. So it doesn't make sense to say that you're going to help yourself by putting another person out of your life. You're cutting another person off. You can't cut another person off and say Hatzlach, be well, have success, because you are part of the same body. Cutting off your hand doesn't make you feel better. You lose a part. It's part of you. And based on that, Tzemach Tzedek explains the inner meaning of what Hillel said. Hillel said in a funny way. He didn't say love your fellow like yourself, like it says in the Torah. Hillel said what's hateful unto you, don't do it to anybody else. Why are you saying in such a weird way? What's hateful unto you, don't do it to anybody else. What Hillel meant was, what's the most hateful thing a person to any person? The most hateful thing to a person is when someone knows their faults. When someone exposes you and shames you, that's the most painful thing. And if someone doesn't even shame you, but they know your faults and they think about your faults, and you know that they know your faults, and you know that they think about your faults, you feel very uncomfortable around that person. 1 second, but I know my faults too. So how can I live with myself? I know my faults better than you. In fact, you may exaggerate my faults, but I know my real faults. So how can I live with myself? My faults might be a lot more than what you think they are, but I can still live with myself. Why? Live with myself, as Shlomo Melech teaches us, Al kol p'shorim t'chas ha'ava. All faults are covered by love. Since Hashem built a human being to love themselves, so my love for myself hides my faults. So the mitzvah of loving your fellow like yourself is to love another person to the point that you don't notice their faults. You're able to live with their faults. Whereas Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said about the love of Hashem to the Jewish people, the love of Hashem to the Jewish people is like a groom whose bride is in a tannery, and the tannery has a foul odor, but the groom doesn't care about the foul odor of the tannery because he sees his bride there. So the Eibusher is the groom, we're the bride. He doesn't care about the fact that we're in Golus. His love extends for us wherever we are. So in a similar way, the mitzvah of Yisrael is loving the person like you love yourself, and you don't notice the faults. You don't think about the faults. And Tzemach Tzedek says that that's a great way to bring God's blessings to you, because the Eibusher knows our faults as well. We ignore the faults of other people and we love them anyways. That's caused Hashem also to do the same thing for us. As a famous story, the Alter Rebbe, the Chassidim had the rights to sell vodka. And at one point, the government took away those rights. So 3 of the top Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe came into the Alter Rebbe's room to ask him to help them because after the government had removed their rights of selling vodka, their finances were significantly compromised. So the Alter Rebbe explained to them a sentence we say in davening: God gives kindness to us. God gives life to us with kindness. They explained that sentence according to Chassidic, and then he went into the main synagogue in the city of Liosh. And Rebbe said when saying the story, that although the Alter Rebbe had a loud voice, a koil adir, a awesome voice, but he wasn't satisfied with his awesome voice. Instead, he went into the center by the bima, and he said very loudly and clearly in the blessing that the kohenim give the Jewish people. Before they give this blessing, they bless God for the mitzvah of blessing the Jewish people. And the blessing is, blessed you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to bless the Jewish people with love. So Alter Rebbe explained that it's not just a blessing, that thanking God for their mitzvah, to bless us with the love of their heart, the blessing to, they're thanking God for their mitzvah, to bless us with the love in the heart of the Kohenim shall bless us with love. Rather, the Alter Rebbe said the blessing is that we should have love. The blessing of the Kohenim is that Jews should love each other. That's a blessing the Kohenim give us, that we should have avos for each other. And that year was a tremendously successful year. The previous Rebbe says, the historian says that year was tremendously successful because of the avos Yisrael that Chassidim had for each other. As a result of that story. Anyways, just getting back to our question. What is Hillel adding? What is Rabbi Akiva adding, rather? He came later than Hillel to what Hillel said. Hillel said, this is the whole Torah. You might think that the way to approach avos Yisrael, what's your yardstick? How much avos Yisrael should I have? I should measure this according to my soul. My soul loves every Jew infinitely because we're all brothers. So therefore, the extent of my avos Yisrael should be without any limit, beyond the limits of Torah. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva says, now, you should know, although the love of a fellow Jew is very important to Torah, it's a principle within Torah itself. It's not something which is against Torah. It's not something which is which is above Torah. Rather, this is a principle within Torah itself. And therefore, the way to perform this mitzvah of Yisrael is according to the guidelines of Torah. That's Rabbi Akiva's addition. It's not like, even B'kuach Nefesh, Torah says that you should push aside the whole Torah to save someone's life. It's not that saving someone's life overrides Torah. It's that Torah itself says that saving someone's life pushes away all the commandments of Torah, or most of the commandments of Torah. So to the mitzvah loving your fellow as yourself, this mitzvah is a principle in Torah. It's a guidance we have from Torah. It's not something which is above Torah. I shouldn't look at it from the perspective of my neshama. I should look at it from the perspective of Torah. And actually, just want to conclude, that's the way that the avos could be long lasting and never end. If I'm going to do avos based upon the way I think it should be, the way I feel, so then one day I feel like this, one day I feel like that, and I may do things in a way that look like they're contributing to avos Yisrael, but actually defeat avos Yisrael. Like my uncle Vashalom wanted to come to the United States to celebrate the mitzvah of his brother, and the Rebbe, I don't have the letter, but the Rebbe's note was, since according to Torah, your obligation right now is to be in yeshiva studying, and so leaving yeshiva in Israel would be against Torah, whatever the reason was, because it was in Israel, because whatever the reason was, but that was the principle. It's against Torah. You write, he wrote to the Rebbe, that he needs to leave Israel to come to Bar Mitzvah because this is what will bring peace to the family. I know what he was thinking. Maybe he just felt like, he's all the way in Israel and like everyone needs him. But either way, it'll bring peace in the family. The Rebbe said it can't be, it'll bring peace in the family. Because it says about the Torah, the Torah, it says about itself, its paths are paths of pleasantness and peace. So it can't be that by going against the Torah, it's going to contribute to peace. If you want to have peace, you have to go according to the guidelines of Torah. So Rabbi Akiva is not actually limiting what Hillel said and saying only do avos according to Torah. He's also telling us the way to really achieve avos Yisrael. Avos can only be achieved through the Torah because it's called a chav. And that's what I wanted to share today. Any questions, comments? All right. See you. Have a good Chodesh. Good Vav.